Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about my Week 8 wide receiver starter sits for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about news around the National Football League that pertains to fantasy football in terms of trade rumors and also some injured players that we need to pay attention to going into Week 8. Then we're going to be talking about some matchups for Week 8 at the wide receiver position, then going over my top 36 wide receiver rankings on the week. Before we begin, let me remind all of you, if you haven't yet already, click that subscribe button, click that bell notification button to stay up to date on my latest content. It lets you know when my latest content is out, lets you know when my live streams are up, and also don't forget to click the like button on today's video. I really do appreciate it, everybody. Hey everybody, how's it going? All right, so really quickly, also don't forget there are timestamps down below. For those of you who somehow forget or are new to the channel, I know a lot of people don't go and look into the description, but there's always going to be timestamps there. So go ahead and check that out if you're looking for a couple specific players. But for those of you who watch every episode, thank you. I do appreciate that, and it's really helpful. So before we talk about anything in terms of the wide receiver position, I want to talk about a couple rumors around the National Football League and a couple pieces of information in terms of injuries. People practicing today that I've been able to at least gather this morning before this video comes out. Probably after this video is uploaded, there's going to be other pieces of information in terms of other players practicing, but we'll talk about that tomorrow as it pertains to fantasy football and all that kind of nature. But as of right now, what have we established? So far, Adam Thielen has been ruled out. He's right here below me. Adam Thielen's been ruled out for this Thursday night, which was expected considering he left the game with the hamstring injury the other night. So that's not a big deal. Other than that, in that matchup, there is a potential that Josh Norman does not play. Therefore, Stefon Diggs is going to get an even bigger boost of potential this coming week against the Redskins on Thursday Night Football. Short week, sure, but I think the Vikings, they're on another level right now, on a pretty good roll, and they should be looking good this week. Outside of that, a couple pieces of rumors and news. Obviously, we saw the two big trades that took place yesterday at the wide receiver position. Mohamed Sanu going to the Patriots and Emmanuel Sanders going to the 49ers. I'll talk about both of them specifically later in this video and how I think they're going to transition, because it does take a while to go into a new offense, learn completely new schemes and play calls and all that kind of thing, and refresh your brain in terms of learning a new playbook. So that it'll take a while for them to get transition. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I heard somewhere around the National Football League, the Philadelphia Eagles were looking to trade for Emmanuel Sanders and or Mohamed Sanu before they were dealed off to those two respective teams. I still think that the Philadelphia Eagles are looking for another piece. Their offense cannot move. Zach Ertz is barely being used. Alshon Jeffery is getting completely bottled up by double teams. The running game is not working. The offensive line is not working. I heard somewhere that potentially Robby Anderson could be traded to the Eagles. I'm not sure I'm not validifying this information. I'm not validating it. And as of right now, I'm just kind of throwing it out there. There's a potential. I heard that there was a possibility that this could take place this week. So keep an eye out on it. But I know for sure that the Eagles want another wide receiver because Deshaun Jackson not looking great. And I don't know if he's coming back anytime soon. So that was another piece of information. In terms of other pieces of news, Tyrell Williams earlier this week, he did practice today. So now that we've established that, he is not on today's graphic because I don't know exactly whether he's trending to play or not, but we'll keep that in mind because Tyrell Williams has been a pretty good contributor for that offense thus far this season at the wide receiver position, and he deserves to be on this list if in fact he is going to play this week. But that is the information that I just pretty much had this morning. And let's go and let's talk about the matchups of the wide receiver position for Week 8 of the fantasy football season. All right, so at the top, obviously the Eagles continuing to give up the most points to opposing wide receivers on a weekly basis in half-point PPR scoring formats on average. Now, is it a big surprise? Not really. Their secondary has not been great. And going into this week, John Brown has another great matchup, and he did great against the Miami Dolphins. Should probably have another good game here. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that cannot stop anybody in the passing game. The question is, can Ryan Tannehill take advantage of this? I think he can. I think last week's performance against a better secondary from the Los Angeles Chargers kind of gives me more confidence in playing Ryan Tannehill and using potentially his wide receiver core. We have Corey Davis, we have A.J. Brown, we have Adam Humphries. These are three valuable prospects that could have value going forward now that they have a quarterback that can actually actually wants to throw the ball into tight windows and try to make plays. Marcus Mariota was always afraid of throwing interceptions. That was his biggest plague. So going into this matchup, I don't mind a guy like Corey Davis, so we'll talk about him in a little bit. The Houston Texans playing against the Raiders. If Tyrell Williams comes back, only helps him. The Oakland Raiders, the other side of that matchup, obviously DeAndre Hopkins is on the thumbnail for a reason. Will Fuller's out. So Kenny Stills, Kiki Cutie, who's going to have the biggest impact there. We also have the Falcons. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf will be good against them. The New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints defense, again, they're great against the run, but against opposing wide receivers have not been great thus far this season. We saw Allen Robinson really put in a number on them last week, and I think if Christian Kirk can come back, he could potentially do the same. Larry Fitzgerald has not been anywhere to be found. Larry Fitzgerald, after the first 2 weeks of the season, yikes, where has he gone? It's unfortunate, but hopefully they can get back to passing the ball heavily in that offense and potentially feeding a guy like Larry Fitzgerald, because a lot of us, we play him in favorable matchups hoping that he's going to have big games, but he hasn't had one in a while thus far this season. Moving on, who else gives up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers? The Vikings. Obviously when Marvin Jones shows up, scores 4 receiving touchdowns on you, Amendola does whatever he feels like, and Golladay didn't even contribute. It makes a pretty big difference. Therefore, McLaurin could have himself a pretty good game this week against that secondary. Then we have the Giants, the Dolphins, and the Redskins. All three of these teams, again, they have always been in this bottom half, giving up a lot of points to opposing running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks all season long. So it is no big surprise. Speaking of Marvin Jones, he'll be taking on the Giants. We just had, what's his name? Goodness gracious. We just had John Brown go for a big game against the Miami Dolphins. What about Juju? Coming off of a bye week, why not? Why can't Juju have a great week here? And then we have the Washington Redskins, like I mentioned earlier, potentially without Josh Norman, going against, this pretty fiery offense of the Minnesota Vikings. Now let's talk about a little bit more of the tougher matchups. The Green Bay Packers going against Matt Moore. Is he going to be able to contribute or produce enough? Cincinnati Bengals not giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers. Then, yet again, that has to do with the fact that teams only have to run the ball to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. They often have early leads and are running the clock out later in games. That being said, Chris Conley, Dede Westbrook were fantastic last week. I expect the Rams receiving core to be great this week as well. And then we go ahead and we see the Seahawks, the Titans, the Bears, the Bills, the Cowboys, the Browns, the 49ers, and the Patriots. As we all know, the Cowboys and the Ravens are on a bye week this week, so those two teams should not be taken into account. But other than that, these were the matchups going into Week 8 of the fantasy football season. This is how much defenses have given up to opposing wide receivers thus far this season through weeks 1 through 7 in half-point PPR scoring formats, just to kind of give you guys some perspective on. The difference between let's say the Washington Redskins giving up 31.59 points and the Pittsburgh Steelers giving up 28.21. Really, it's a 3-point slide. Is it 3 points a lot? Not really. It's 30 receiving yards. So, again, a lot of these teams, even though they are considered to have one of the worst defenses against the receiving position, really there's a lot of teams that have struggled thus far this season against opposing wide receivers. But it's all about trends. It's about who as of late has been really struggling and who can we take advantage of in terms of potentially players missing games, Xavier Howard, Josh Norman, etc. Top cornerbacks that could be missing this week, Drake Kirkpatrick, etc. All right, let's go ahead and let's talk about my top 12 wide receivers on the week, starting off with my wide receiver ones, the guys that you can play and not really have to worry about in fantasy football, starting off with number 1, DeAndre Hopkins. Now, there's something that we saw in the last 2 weeks that as a DeAndre Hopkins owner, I am very confident about, and I'm beginning to see DeAndre Hopkins get back to where he was last season. Now, week 1, 13 targets, 8 receptions, had a monster game, over 100 receiving yards. Okay, wow. That was interesting. All right, so as I was saying, 13 targets, 8 receptions, 111 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, right? He had an incredible week 1. We were thinking, DeAndre Hopkins as a first-round pick, we just touchdown. It was a beautiful decision. And then since then, really didn't do much. But in the last 2 weeks, 12 targets each game, 9 receptions each game. But the thing that made a huge difference was against the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, he only had 55 receiving yards. He doubled up that number this past week against the Indianapolis Colts, and he also had a receiving touchdown and had another receiving touchdown called back. What do I think is contributing to this? Well, they know that they have to feed DeAndre Hopkins. He is the best piece of their offense outside of Deshaun Watson. Outside of Watson, really, DeAndre Hopkins is perhaps even the most valuable player in that entire offensive scheme. And if they cannot contribute or at least implement him on a weekly basis in the game plan, they're not doing their job correctly. So going forward, with Will Fuller out, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be relied upon even more. And I think going forward in these easy matchups should be great. I love the matchup against the Raiders this week. We saw Aaron Rodgers torch that defense and do whatever he wanted, feeding the ball to a bunch of different receiving targets. I think Valdez-Scantling scored. Aaron Jones scored, Aaron Rodgers on the ground scored. Jimmy Graham scored. Jake Kumaro scored. Jamal Williams scored. There were so many receiving threats that scored. I think that it doesn't really matter who you're feeding the ball to. This Raiders defense is going to struggle defensively throughout the stopping the air raid that is coming towards them. And I think DeAndre Hopkins this week as my number one, pretty solid play. And that's why he's on the thumbnail. All right, moving on to number 2, Julio Jones. Julio Jones had a ridiculously good week compared to weeks prior. And compared to, you have Jalen Ramsey on you this time. It made a pretty big difference. Yes, Jalen Ramsey didn't shadow him the entire game. Jalen Ramsey was kind of taking out every player so just to kind of keep him fresh because he's learning this new defense and they want to keep him healthy going forward. Healthy, my back hurts, whatever. Either way, the issue is whether or not Matt Ryan's going to play. I'm assuming Matt Ryan's going to play. The report that I saw is that he is trending towards playing this week, and that's exactly what we want to see. As Julio Jones owners or anybody associated with that offense, Austin Hooper, Calvin Ridley, Devontae Freeman, you need Matt Ryan to be at the helm. You can't have Matt Schaub out there. Okay, Matt Schaub from the Texans maybe 10 years ago, sure, I don't mind him there. But as of right now, if it's Matt Schaub when he's 40 years old as a backup quarterback, I'm not really confident in that. But going forward, I'm hopefully going to see more and more work from Julio Jones. Right now, in a full PPR format, the dude is playing out of his mind. But unfortunately, in standard half PPR, which I play half PPR mainly, he hasn't been great. Right? He's been doing double-digit points, but I want to see some touchdowns. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3. That's unfortunate. Sure, you can catch the ball 6 to 7, 8 times a game, almost get 100 yards every game, but we got to see more. I don't want 13 points. I want 19. All right, this is the week against the Seahawks. Moving on, let's talk about my number 3, Michael Thomas. There was a stat that I saw that I think no other receiver except for, who was the other one? I'm not sure exactly who it was. Maybe I have it on my phone. There was a stat that I saw that it was Michael Thomas thus far this season is the only wide receiver, or he's one of 2 wide receivers that has caught 50 yards or more in every single game, and nobody else has done that. I think John Brown and Michael Thomas are the only 2 wide receivers thus far this season who have scored or have gotten 50 yards plus every single game, which is ridiculous. Considering Teddy Bridgewater's presence, it's not Drew Brees, but I did hear something that Drew Brees is practicing this week and could be a game-time decision for Sunday. Keep that in mind. The amount of targets he gets, 13 targets, 11 receptions, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 11 targets, 9 receptions, over 100 yards, almost every, this is ridiculous. He's incredible. Michael Thomas is as consistent as it gets, and especially for those of you in PPR formats, you know that for certain because the guy's catching the ball, 80% of the time plus every single game, and he's ridiculous. So as of right now, going forward, Michael Thomas into the matchup against Patrick Peterson, not really worried about it. I think he'll be fine. He's my number 3. Moving on to number 4, Cooper Kupp. Even though Cooper Kupp wasn't fantastic this past week, it was a lot better than what he did against the 49ers, which was pretty upsetting to say the least. As of right now, Cooper Kupp isn't scoring those touchdowns. He was on that trend of 100-plus yards or scoring a touchdown in every single game, back to back to back. As of late, he's kind of cooled down, right? He's come back down to earth. Cooper Kupp is he's fallen back down to earth, and I think they're spreading the ball more, which is exactly what this offense needs to do. Now, I do not expect Cooper Kupp to completely disappear because we know he is the security blanket of Jared Goff, so I expect him to be fantastic, and he's a guy that I always want to start because he always has the potential to having that 100 plus yard game and that touchdown. Therefore, we're throwing him at number 4. I don't think there's another receiver that is consistently getting the amount of work that he does within said offense. Sure, there was that game of stretches, right? 12 targets, 15 targets, 17 targets. Since then, he's only had 14 targets in the last 2 games. Sure, it's slowed down a little bit, but I think we'll progressively see them get a little bit more targets in his direction. The only reason we haven't is because the matchups have either been out of control, in which they were getting destroyed by the 49ers, or this last game against the Falcons, out of control, as in they were up too many points and they wanted to kill clock. Might be the same this week against the Bengals, but I think he'll be fine. All right, moving on to number 5, Chris Godwin. Godwin coming off of a bye week. The guy is incredible. He's as consistent as it gets as the wide receiver position. The guy is, what is it? 400 plus receiving yard games. And they're not just 100 plus, 120 plus receiving yard games. As of right now, thus far this season, the dude scored 6 touchdowns in 6 games. It's incredible. Chris Godwin is as consistent as it gets. He is the quote-unquote Larry Fitzgerald of this offense for a Bruce Arians. Looking back at what they were able to do in Arizona back in those couple years ago, he's perfectly, filled into this offense and become the number 1 wide receiver. And going forward, he's going to continue to do so. I don't really mind the matchup against the Titans. The Titans play a man defense, and I think it's going to be hard for them to keep up with Chris Godwin and this passing offense. All right, moving on to number 6, Stefon Diggs. Now, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, there is a chance that Josh Norman's going to miss this game, and if that's the case, Stefon Diggs, as of late, the deep ball has been there consistently in the last 2 games, 7 receptions each game, over 19 targets in the last 2 games combined, 168 yards, 3 touchdowns, which was, against the Eagles for certain. And then this past week, 142 yards, receiving 0 touchdowns, but still, I think he dropped a touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if you guys have seen that. I'll retweet it on my Twitter again. These guys just keep dropping touchdowns. A lot of guys drop touchdowns, and you don't hear about it, and it hurts, but either way, I think the matchup is far too easy for him to not have a monster week. That's why I have him at 6. This is the highest he has been thus far this season. It is because he has progressively gotten to this stage. It has taken a while, sure, but we have finally gotten back to Stefon Diggs of last season, where he is the ultimate wide receiver and just dominating as a number 1 on this team. He finished as a top 12 wide receiver in half PPR last year, and I think he's going to try to get back to that with the remainder of this season. Obviously, he's got a ways to go, but he's catching up quickly. All right, moving on to number 7, Juju Smith-Schuster. Like I mentioned, why not Juju? If Xavier Howard is out for the 3rd week in a row, which I'm assuming he's going to be, why? Because this team is tanking games, and why does he want to play? Sure, he could be injured, but is there really an incentive besides getting paid or getting, an extra game check here and there for Xavier Howard to really, put his body on the line for this team? I don't know. That's a personal question for him, and I'm not, doubting his lack of or his drive or want to play. But I'm just saying, as of right now, why not Juju? Juju Smith-Schuster, Mason Rudolph is going to be coming back, and I expect this offense to be good. They're going to run the ball. That's for certain. Hopefully they don't take too big of a lead, and hopefully we can get Juju Smith-Schuster more implemented within this offense. We have seen many weeks in which Juju has been, completely rendered useless. Games against Cincinnati, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 15 yards. And in this past game before the bye against the Los Angeles Chargers, 4 targets, 1 reception, 7 yards. But we've seen better games. We've seen 3 games of plus 75 yards receiving, 2 games in which he scored touchdowns. We've seen better Juju thus far this season, and hopefully we're going to get back to that. After they've come out of this bye week, hopefully they're going to continue to feed him the ball and more establish him as a number 1 wide receiver like he deserves to be. He's my number 7 on the week. Moving on to number 8, T.Y. Hilton. Like I mentioned last week, perhaps I had T.Y. Hilton a little bit higher than just about anybody, but this offense is very good. T.Y. Hilton's rest of the season schedule is ridiculously good, and going forward, the guy is going to see majority of the targets. Sure, we saw Zach Pascal have some pretty good performances yet last week. Eric Ebron was playing pretty well. I think that only helps T.Y. That alleviates pressure off of him to make all the plays. When you have other receiving targets out there making plays consistently, you have Jacoby Brissett not getting hit because of how good this offensive line is in pass protection. It only allows T.Y. Hilton to use his speed, get over the top of defenses, get himself open, and find himself some fantasy value. Now that he's fully healthy, they had their bye week. His hamstring injury is gone. T.Y. Hilton going forward, I really do believe is a top 12 wide receiver. I love the matchup this week, despite, the Denver Broncos are good against opposing wide receivers. They play, listen, T.Y. Hilton's pretty good. And I'm sure, Chris Harris Jr. will have his hands full this week. All right, moving on, or Kareem Jackson, whoever it ends up being. Moving on to number 9, John Brown. John Brown last week, I think, what did I have him at? Number 10? And I thought he was too high. I guess he wasn't too high. Like I mentioned last week, he's probably going to be higher than anybody else has him. I love John Brown. He plays the Eagles. The Eagles, as we know, have not played well. Amari Cooper was fine against them last week after being injured all week long. The week before that, we saw Stefon Diggs with 3 touchdowns and over 150 yards. Adam Thielen even scored against them. John Brown's going to be fantastic this week. He is a must-play in my eyes in this offense as a wide receiver. Like I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Michael Thomas, he is one of 2 wide receivers that in their games thus far this season has had 50-plus receiving yards in every single game. He's in pretty good company with Michael Thomas there. I love John Brown. He's my number 9. Moving on to number 10, Mike Evans. Yes, Mike Evans has volatility issues. Some games he's a monster. Some games he completely disappears and he leaves you out to dry. But I'm okay with this. I am going to take the risk because when we see those boom games, it's unbelievable. When we see the bust games, sure, it's pretty brutal. But as of the last 4 games, I mean, he's had some really monster performance. 15 targets, 8 receptions, 190 yards, 3 touchdowns. Sure, against the New York Giants, that's not difficult to do. We'll talk about a couple of Detroit wide receivers and what they're going to do to them this week. And then the following week after that, 7 targets, 4 receptions. 89 yards and a touchdown. Okay, great. Then the volatility kicks in. 3 targets, 0 receptions, 0 yards the following week after that. Then Jameis Winston comes out and says, we are going to feed Mike Evans the ball. What does that mean? Oh, guess what? Get ready for the big game. 17 targets, 9 receptions, 96 yards, 2-point conversion. The guy is one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. Him and Chris Godwin are perfectly complements of each other on the same field. I mean, it's like when we think of the top duos at the wide receiver position in the National Football League, we think of Adam Thielen, Stefon Diggs, we think of Godwin and Evans right now as being one of the top 2 on the same team, just torching teams. And as of right now, Mike Evans, sure, he could have volatility issues. I'm playing him in the Titans matchup. I love it, and I think Mike Evans is going to have a good week. Moving on to number 11, we have Tyler Lockett. Here's the thing about Tyler Lockett. Sure, his target counts have gone down comparatively to the first couple weeks of the season, which is unfortunate. But again, this is a guy that continues to see touchdown work, continues to see work in the passing game on a consistent basis. Sure, they want to run the ball. This is a run-first team. They have been since last year, and they're going to continue to do so. I think the fact that Will Disley went down and the reemergence of 4 wide receiver sets, bringing in Jerome Brown, DJ Moore, it's kind of, it hurts them. Not DJ Moore, David Moore. David Moore? Yeah, David. Is it David Moore? I don't even remember. I'm pretty sure it is. But either way, going forward, I want to see more targets, right? In the last 4 weeks, 4 targets, 5 targets, 7 targets. Sure, he caught almost every single pass that was thrown towards him. For 3 weeks straight, he caught every single pass that was thrown towards him. But I want to see the 12 target, 13 target, Tyreek Hill. Or not Tyreek Hill, T.Y. Hilton. No, Tyler Lockett. Oh my God. Help me. I'm fading away. Help me. I thought Tyler Lockett, right? And I put the T, and then I got the L, and then the Y somehow, the Tyler, T-Y, Tyreek, it all mixed up. Regardless, I expect Tyler Lockett to have a good week. I just need to see more targets. That's it. And he'll be a better receiving option. But this week's matchup against the Falcons seems far too easy for me to leave him on the bench or leave him anywhere in the wide receiver 2 conversation. Therefore, he is my number 11. Moving on to number 12, Julian Edelman. Edelman's been unbelievable since like week 3. 10 targets, 7 targets, 9 targets, 15 targets, 12 targets. The last 3 weeks, over 100 yards receiving twice, a touchdown once. Yes, if you play at a PPR, you know how valuable he is. He's unbelievable. And going into this week's matchup against the Browns, I'm not worried about it whatsoever. He should be fine. And he should be a top 12 wide receiver. He's the number 1 receiver of that offense. It's going to take a little while for Mohamed Sanu to get established, and even when he does, he is not going to cut into Julian Edelman's workload. Therefore, Julian Edelman as my number 12 should be great and should be good to go. Moving on. Let's go ahead and see here. Goodness gracious, I don't even know what happened. The T.Y., the Tyreek, the Tyler Lockett, they all messed me up. But speaking of Tyreek Hill, that's right, Tyreek Hill. Here's my issue with Tyreek Hill. As of right now, with Matt Moore being the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, we're going to see a little bit of a different offense. I think they have to rebuild this offense in order to kind of suit to the, it's kind of hard to explain. we're gonna probably see them have to run the ball consistently, right? Damian Williams and LaShawn McCoy, they need to get the ball moving, because if you are forcing Matt Moore to throw the ball 30 times, you're not going to win games. And what they need to do at the 5-2 record that they sit right now, they need to win a couple games before Patrick Mahomes comes back, because their division is pretty competitive. The AFC is competitive, and you start to slide games here, we're going to see problems start to arise for this Kansas City Chiefs offense. So how do you do that? You implement Tyreek Hill as much as you can. You use him out of the backfield. You get him into open space with screen passes, with bubble screens. Try to feed these receivers the ball as much as you possibly can, and don't just force them to, have to make a deep ball play. Because if you force that, you're probably not going to see it, because the volatility of that kind of play is probably not likely, especially against the secondary like the Green Bay Packers. So what I'm saying right now is that as of right now with Tyreek Hill, don't expect a ginormous 20-point game, but don't expect something of a 5-point. I think they want to feed their best players, and they're going to have to do so for the next couple weeks. And I think Tyreek Hill is going to be just fine. He's my number 13. Moving on to number 14, Keenan Allen. All right, Keenan Allen has been awful. There's nothing else that needs to be said. He has been awful, but you get to play against the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears have not been great. If this ends up being a rain game, which I looked at the weather, it said chance for humidity and chance for a potential I think it said something about a chance for a potential stream of rain coming down during that game, like 70%. Okay, that's what a couple of guys that I talked to also said. So if that is the case, and we're going to see a rain game between the Bears and the Chargers, it's not going to go in Keenan Allen's direction. So that would definitely hurt him. But I just have a hard time leaving Keenan Allen on the bench. For as bad as he's been for the last 4 or 5 weeks, I have a hard time leaving him on the bench. If you can go ahead and do so, and you can do it and not have to worry about it, and you have a better option, I would say go for it, because he really just has not been consistent enough for me to just put him on the starting lineup and hope. Because hope is going to only take me so far until this guy just screws me and I lose too many games because of it. All right, moving on to number 15, Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson's been incredible. Speaking of the Chargers and Bears, Allen Robinson in the last 2 weeks has been the only guy that has caught the ball for this team. Sure, we see Tariq Cohen catch the ball every now and then, maybe Anthony Miller, maybe Taylor Gabriel, but really, Allen Robinson has been unbelievable. Sure, a lot of his production from last week was in garbage time, but again, he had 16 targets. Like, that doesn't just come out of nowhere. I don't care if it's in garbage time. I don't care if it's in the first quarter. If you're putting up numbers, I want you on my roster. And as of right now, Allen Robinson's been far too vital for this offense and far too valuable for me to, have him anywhere outside of this top 15 range against the Chargers defense that has not been good. There's a possibility, sure, this could be a rain game, could hurt him and Keenan Allen, but if it is not, these two guys are going to be pretty decent. I like Allen Robinson's potential this week. He's my number 15. Moving on to 16, Odell Beckham Jr. They had a bye week. Before the bye week, we saw the usage of Odell Beckham, increase. We saw more targets in his direction. We saw a little bit more favoriting of him by Baker Mayfield. And that was against the Seahawks, right? The Seahawks secondary, not great. Obviously, you're going to have a little bit of trouble. You have Stephon Gilmore probably all over you, McCourty over the top. It's going to be difficult for Odell Beckham to get anything going. That's why he sits at 16. But I really do think this bye week is what they needed. When I say they, I mean the Cleveland Browns. They really needed this bye week, and hopefully coming off of this bye week, they can go ahead and transition into something of a better looking offense where you're feeding your best players, Chubb, Jarvis, Odell, and we're going to get some production out of each of them, and Baker can stop turning over the damn ball. That's all we need. Just stop turning over the ball and feed these players. Not Ricky Seals-Jones, because nobody uses him. Nobody. All right, anyway, I think he'll be fine. It's a little bit difficult to play him, especially into that matchup, but as of right now, I have a hard time leaving him on my bench. Moving on to number 17, Kenny Golladay. Now, Kenny Golladay is interesting because the New York Giants, they're not good. They are not good defensively. We saw that last week, and the Cardinals didn't even have to throw the ball. All they had to do is run the ball on them, and I think as of right now, sure, Kenny Golladay was extremely volatile, dropped a goose egg for you this past week as Marvin Jones caught every single thing in the red zone, but I still do think Kenny Golladay is the number one of this team, and he's going to continue to be. I just need to see more of a balance between him and Marvin Jones, because if we can see that, then we can confidently play them both and not have to worry. As of right now, the worry is my biggest concern on if Marvin Jones ends up coming out and having a monster game again and Kenny Galladay's left in the dirt. This could turn into a trend in which we have to toss up a coin and hope that he's throwing it towards Golladay on that given week, which is definitely not something that you want to do as a fantasy owner. All right, moving on to number 18, Coutland Sutton. Here's the thing about Coutland Sutton. Every single game he has had at least 7 targets thus far this season, with the absence of Emmanuel Sanders in this offense. Who gets the biggest boost is Deshaun Hamilton, right? He becomes that slot receiver that's going to run around and try to make plays. So for those of you looking for somebody like that, go pick him up because he could potentially have work, because there is going to be 6 targets up for grabs in this offense. And probably something close to 60 plus air yards available for a guy like Coutland Sutton. As it sits right now, Coutland Sutton is projected to have a monster year just off of what he's done thus far. It's only going to get better because he's going to be relied upon more. He's going to see more targets in this offense. And from what we saw from him even last week in a game that was awful, Joe Flacco could not get the ball out of his hands fast enough. Coutland Sutton was still a great receiving option and their most valuable piece of their offense, really to try to open up the field and get anything going. He was the only one that was even good or remotely good last week. All right, moving on to number 19, DJ Chark. All right, the Jets are terrible. Their offense sucks. Their defense can't stop anybody. As an organization, they're in trouble. But DJ Chark this week with Minshew should be fantastic. I think they're going to be able to take advantage of that weaker secondary that has not been exposed lately because of how easy it was for the Patriots to just run the ball down their throat. Leonard Fournette's going to do the same. He's going to run the ball, but I think DJ Chark, a guy that really was absent last week because of the boosts that Dede Westbrook and Chris Conley saw last week, I think Chark will get back on track. He's my number 19 on the week. Moving on to number 20, Robert Woods. You're playing against the Cincinnati Bengals. It's far too easy. It's in London, sure, but I think from what we've seen as of late, the balance of targets between the 3 wide receivers, Cooks, Woods, and Kupp, is kind of in the right direction, in my opinion. Obviously, we're not seeing Kupp have 17 targets every week. We're seeing like a 7, 8, 8. And as of right now, Robert Woods is getting more targets, and it's exactly where we want him to be in terms of receptions. He's going to catch a majority of the things that you throw in his direction. And as long as, especially because of Jared Goff's health, as long as Jared Goff is not pressured and the offensive line can stand hold and give him time, he's going to be able to extend plays. He's going to be able to make plays with his arms, and Robert Woods should be fine this week. I think anybody in that receiving offense should be fine. But the only issue I have is if, in fact, the Cincinnati Bengals aren't competing, we could end up seeing similar points for Robert Woods than he did last week. He might not score a touchdown because of the fact that they get ahead so early. They're just going to run the ball out with Darrell Henderson in the second half. All right, moving on to number 21. Speaking of that Cincinnati Bengals matchup, we have Tyler Boyd. What do I do with Tyler Boyd, right? That's probably what you're asking. Tyler Boyd at this moment in time, 14 targets last week, only 5 receptions, and he fumbled. When you get 14 targets, that's exactly what I want to see. I don't care if you dropped every single one. As long as you got 14 targets, as long as the offense is predicated around feeding you the ball, that's all I want to see. And we saw that. And we saw that this offense threw the ball so much. Alex Erickson had 14 targets. Auden Tate has a good amount of targets. Going forward, probably no AJ Green in sight. Tyler Boyd, I'm still fine with him as a top 24 wide receiver. I have him at 21 this week because I do believe that there's going to be plays to be made. He's sitting in the slot position. He doesn't have to worry about a Ramsey shadowing him, and I think he'll be fine. He's my number 21 on the week. Moving on to 22, Calvin Ridley. With the absence of Mohamed Sanu, Calvin Ridley gets the boost, plain and simple. Mohamed Sanu had the most wide receiver snaps for the Atlanta Falcons for the last 2 seasons. And as long as he is gone, Calvin Ridley gets a boost. Julio Jones gets a boost because they will be on the field more, and it is going to lead to more targets and more fantasy production. Only helps Calvin Ridley. And in the Seahawks matchup, which I really like, I think he'll be fantastic. Moving on to 23, Marvin Jones. I have to mention him. Why? You play against the Giants. The Giants are not good in the secondary. Janoris Jenkins cannot cover anybody, right? Anytime there is a bigger threat, like I mentioned a little bit earlier with Mike Evans, when he played against the Giants, Janoris Jenkins had 3 touchdowns caught on him, over 100 receiving yards. Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay, 2 bigger stature wide receivers, are going to be able to take advantage of this matchup. And I do think that there is a potential that Marvin Jones ends up catching another touchdown this week, because when we think of what Matthew Stafford is thinking, when you get into the red zone and you've thrown the last 4 passes, 4 touchdowns to Marvin Jones, why not go back to it? Why not go back to the well? I think there's obviously a pretty good chance that he goes back to the well. Marvin Jones finds some value. He's my number 23. 24, Brandin Cooks. Again, similar to Robert Woods, has seen more targets, especially last week, than he has in the past. The biggest thing is whether these guys score touchdowns. They're going to catch passes. They're going to get 60 yards. But I don't want 9 points. I don't want 8 points. I want 15. And I want a touchdown, or I want big yard totals. And that is going to possibly be a chance this week because of the matchup against the Bengals. But going forward, I'm just a little worried about these guys, because when they start getting into these tougher matchups, it's going to be more difficult for them to make plays. And as of right now, as my number 24, I'm okay with him sitting here, Mr. Brandin Cooks. All right, let's talk about my last group of wide receivers here. All right, I went crazy. I put Corey Davis at 25. Why? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers cannot stop a soul on defense. They are giving up the second most points to opposing wide receivers thus far this season. The last time we saw them, Curtis Samuel was playing well. DJ Moore was playing well. Every team is really putting a number on this team. If you want to even go check out that Hidden Gems from, 2 weeks ago? So week 6, week 5? Yeah, something like that. And just listen to the Curtis Samuel section. That is all the stats you need to hear for how good wide receivers have been against this Tampa Bay secondary and how good Corey Davis could potentially be in this offense. I think this is a huge jump. Sure, I threw him to 25, but I just need to make obviously rankings are subject to change, but I had to make a splash here because I do think going forward as the number 1 wide receiver of this team, if in fact, Ryan Tannehill is going to feed him the ball, there's a lot of value to be had here. Moving on to 26, Larry Fitzgerald. I know he's been bad. He was awful last week, only 1 reception, but they didn't need to use him. They didn't need to. All they needed to do was run the ball, and that's what they did. They feed Chase Edmonds the ball 27 times on the ground. They are not going to be allowed to do that this week. Sure, you can do that, but you're not going to win the game doing that. Therefore, they're going to have to pass the ball, and they're going to have to pass the ball against a secondary that has not been good. Allen Robinson just destroyed them in the second half of this game in garbage time. I believe Larry Fitzgerald should be able to get back on track. If he can't do it this week, then I'm done with Larry. Literally, I'm done with Larry. Moving on to number 27, Dede Westbrook. Again, he had a monster week this past week. I don't think that's going to slow him down. I think he's going to continue to stay on track for the last 2 weeks. He's been really good for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and going forward should be fine. As long as Gardner Minshew is looking in his direction, which he continues to do in that slot position, I think Dede Westbrook has a lot of value, especially against the Jets secondary and defense. Should be fine. He's my number 27. Moving on to number 28, the Vikings. Again, they struggled against the secondary-wise in the last couple of weeks. Obviously, Terry McLaurin, a better wide receiver. He is going to be the only guy that is catching balls. It's going to be Case Keenum versus his old team playing against the Vikings. It's going to be Kirk Cousins playing his old team against the Redskins. There's going to be some competition back and forth there. I think Terry McLaurin, as the only receiving option in this offense, is going to be able to do something. He sits here as a wide receiver 3 because, again, it's not going to be easy. Nothing is ever easy. So as of right now, I have confidence in him, but we have to be, we have to weather our expectations, not assume he's going to have a monster week just yet, unless something else, maybe Xavier Rhodes isn't playing. But to be honest, as bad as Xavier Rhodes played against Marvin Jones, I kind of want him to play against Terry McLaurin, potentially. All right, moving on to number 29, Alshon Jeffery. Alshon, really, he got double-teamed. Awuzie, coverage over the top, irrelevant. If, in fact, the Buffalo Bills want to do something close to that with Tre'Davious White or something of that nature, put like Micah Hyde over the top, it's going to be really tough for Alshon Jeffery. That's why I've moved him down, probably like 12 slots than he was last time. I think I had him at like number 18 last week. He's got to move. He's got to move down 12 pegs because he really isn't producing at the level that we expect him to. And it's probably because there isn't another receiving option on that field that is pulling coverage away from his side of the field, which is tough because they're not feeding the ball to Ertz enough. Goddard's getting touches. The running game is not working. The pass rush is getting to Wentz, and it's going to hurt Alshon Jeffery's value. Therefore, he sits here. But I think this week there's always a potential that against this defense, the Bills, sure, they're a pretty good defense overall, but there are some pockets in which they do struggle, and you could take advantage of that and find Alshon Jeffery some value. Moving on to 30, Robby Anderson. If he doesn't end up being traded to the Eagles, which I was talking about a little bit earlier in some rumors, I think he can have a good week. There is no Ramsey. Sure, AJ Boye is going to be on him, but I don't know if anybody can keep up with Robby Anderson. The way I see Robby Anderson, I think I've said this in the past. Robby Anderson is like is a fast Keenan Allen. He's pretty good in route running. He's got his speed definitely, but he's not there. Like unless he has a big game, he's just going to disappear and end up being like Keenan Allen. I'm hoping that because of how bad this Jets team played, they can come into the week 8, try to rewrite the script, because it was just hard to watch. And I'm sure it was probably hard to see your quarterback throw 4 interceptions or at least complete more passes to the opposing team than to you. Hopefully Robby Anderson get back on track. I have him as my number 30 this week. 31, Golden Tate. Playing against his former team, the Lions. Should be fun. I think Golden Tate, because Sterling Shepard is going to still be out with that concussion protocol issue, Golden Tate still has value in this offense and should be fine. He's my number 31. Number 32, Curtis Samuel. I think Curtis Samuel with Kyle Allen as the quarterback has more value than DJ Moore. Unfortunately, that is the case. DJ Moore is spreading the field, making big plays with, not too many catches, but I do believe Curtis Samuel is being used more as a Swiss Army knife of this offense to give him more value. Moving on, Jarvis Landry should be fine coming off of this bye week. Again, Jarvis Landry sometimes sees more work than Odell Beckham because of the amount of coverage he is pulling in his direction. If in fact that is to take place again, Jarvis Landry could present some value for himself this week with an ample amount of targets. Marques Valdez-Scantling this past week on 3 targets, 2 receptions, or was it 3 receptions? Either way, that 75-yard touchdown made a big difference. Otherwise, we have Marques Valdez-Scantling probably off this list. But because he scored that, you get to stay on the list. But it's very volatile. You get to play against the Kansas City Chiefs, which you have a very good chance of playing well against. But again, you haven't played extremely well. You've had a couple big plays here and there, big touchdowns that have saved your weeks and saved your fantasy value. Moving on to number 35, Kenny Stills. I think Kenny Stills is going to be the Will Fuller of this team going forward. He is a speedster. They use that his speed in Miami for many years and in New Orleans a couple years back. So I think Kenny Stills is going to be, and especially from what we saw last week, a lot of deep ball action from him. Kiki Cutie will sit in the flex, not in the flex, in the slot position. And I think there's a good chance that Kenny Stills, as the number 2 wide receiver of this team, because of how much this team wants to use 2 wide receiver sets, could have some pretty ample value. He's my number 35 on the week. Moving on to number 36, DK Metcalf playing against the Falcons. If Tyler Lockett's going to be that great, DK Metcalf had 9 targets, even more than Tyler Lockett had last week. Unfortunately, fumbled late in the game that, led to a touchdown. That's unfortunate. But as a rookie, mistakes happen, not a big deal. We're going to get back to it, and I think DK Metcalf, being that bigger target that they want to feed the ball to in the red zone because of Will Dizzy's absence and they don't have an established tight end, I think DK Metcalf this week against the Falcons could have a touchdown. He's my number 36. Really quickly before we leave today, the 2 wide receivers I wanted to mention, Emmanuel Sanders and Mohamed Sanu. Like I said earlier, I do not believe these guys are going to instantly come in and make a huge difference in the first week of being traded to their respective teams. It takes a very long time to gain chemistry and to also learn said playbooks. This is not easy. The playbooks are ginormous. They're practically, twice as thick as the Bible is. They have to go and learn their sports Bible. Once they do, in the coming weeks, they will have more value and I will be able to rank them. But as of right now, as it currently stands, I personally don't think they're going to rush these guys in. I know that they want to use their brand new toys, but at this moment in time, I'm just going to go ahead and have these 2 off the list. So for those of you who are wondering, these guys have typically been top 36 wide receivers in the past. But as of right now, I just want to take it easy. I don't want to assume that these guys are going to come in and instantly be playing this coming week. So anyway, thank you everybody for watching. I appreciate you spending time today watching today's video. If you like today's video, click the like button. If you haven't yet already, click the subscribe button. And again, tomorrow we will be talking about quarterbacks and tight ends for week 8. Before the Thursday night matchup between the Vikings and the Redskins. Thank you guys again for watching. And until tomorrow, I'll see you guys. Peace.